In segment one, we were planning on talking about some other bits and pieces from the women's cricket world. I'm going to quickly get into it now because the most important event this week on the global cricketing calendar isn't the IPL, in my view anyway. It's the Women's T20 World Cup qualifier. This is the World Cup scheduled for Bangladesh later this year. I think September, the tournament proper. September. So they're off in Abu Dhabi. It's a 10-team tournament competing for 2 spots, but so much rides on this. Like, take the Ireland situation. If they win here, they get bonus payments from the ICC and more is possible in their domestic game. If they don't make it, then the funding isn't quite there at the same level and then they've got to cut their cloth, right? So these tournaments do mean an awful lot for not just qualifying for the World Cup, but the revenue streams as well. Ireland and Sri Lanka are the 2 top seeds. Having played at the last World Cup, they get automatic qualification for this tournament. Then from there, Thailand and UAE from Asia, USA from the Americas, Netherlands and Scotland from Europe, Uganda, who made the men's T20 World Cup, and Zimbabwe from Africa. And then the East Asia Pacific team, Vanuatu. Back to them in a moment. But it's very competitive. Sri Lanka are ranked 7th in the world. Ireland 10, Zimbabwe 12th, Scotland 14th. You know, this isn't like sides who are way down the pecking order. These are all teams who will be going to the UAE expecting to make it. And they're the groups, you've got to win your group. Group A, Scotland, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Uganda, UAE. I mean, Thailand have played in the World Cup in 2020 in Australia and looked like they were on the rise. Scotland, who we did a special on them last year, their women's team have come along in leaps and bounds in the last few years under the captaincy of Catherine Bryce. And Sri Lanka, who we mentioned before, have just knocked off South Africa in a couple of series as recently as a week ago. So that's Group A. Then Group B, Ireland, who desperately need to make this tournament, the Netherlands, UAE, Zimbabwe, and Vanuatu. So Group B is probably a fraction softer than Group A. Said I'd come back to Vanuatu. That's been the main storyline in the week leading up to this qualification competition. So to get here, they needed to knock off the regional giant PNG, who are ranked like 12 in the world or something like that. They did that. This is a really big deal for Vanuatu cricket. But normally how they play, it's like a club team. They borrow kit and they share kit amongst the players. So that's what they were planning on doing for this far higher profile tournament. They were planning on sort of sharing amongst themselves and using their tour fee to pay for equipment in the UAE. And then they realized this is just ridiculous. They're going to a global World Cup qualifier and a crowdfunder's been run. They needed 10,000 Australian dollars or thereabouts, and they got there comfortably. They only get $500,000 a year US from the ICC. This is according to Tim Cutler. That has to pay for everything. And remember, they've got contracted players. So they have to make do with so little. That's why they're in this kind of situation. So Selena Solomon's team, I met Selena a number of times at Fair Break. 8 of the 15 of the crew she's taking were picking fruit in Australia over the summer to supplement their income. So it's an incredibly special story about what's possible in global cricket, especially women's cricket in associate land. And Peter Duffy as well has been a huge part of this success with providing Vanuatu with bats. Peter Duffy's a former captain of mine at Mentone, a great man. He should have an Order of Australia, really. So they've been able to cobble this thing together. Yep. They won't get out of the group. They won't win Group B, but the very fact that they are there gives promise about what's possible for other teams around the world in the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, there's something so incongruous about seeing those posts coming up, trying to fundraise just to be able to be properly kitted out to go and play in a tournament at this level of the sport. It just jars so much. And I mean, I know we've talked to death about the distributions and financial distributions and stuff, and the kind of ridiculous outrage that some people have when you question that of like, oh, look, it's other people begging for India's money kind of stuff. But it's not about it. It's not that cash should be going to England or Australia. It's that it could be going to such a small amount of it could be going to countries where that small amount will revolutionise the way that they play the game compared to going somewhere where it doesn't make much difference.
I've realised that's in the troll farm jargon. So we've got crime or must be one of those phrases. That the other one is begging for India's money. Like anyone who could arrive at that conclusion, fucking kidding themselves. Anyway, not to worry. One other thing on associate women's cricket, I talked about Gibraltar the other week. The Gibraltar women played their first ever T20 internationals over the weekend, and they smashed Estonia in all 3 games, hosting them there at the National Stadium. Again, great stories. A 42-year-old Helen Mumford making an international debut, taking 1 for 1, 3 for 9, then 2 for 11. I know they'll be quibbling about status and whether these games should be internationals and all the rest of it. But since that recognition has been liberated 4 or 5 years ago now, it has meant that sides like this exist and are actually trying to play against each other more often. So that's a great thing.
Yeah, there's more incentive to do it if that's the case. The last bit that we were going to talk about earlier, but we'll get to it now. Meg Lanning's interview during the week, hugely significant. I think that she chose to come out and give such a personal interview with Mark Howard on his show, and to talk through why she'd retired, so early. I mean, yes, she debuted a long, long time ago, so she'd been playing for Australia for about as long as anybody could hope to have an international career, but retiring at 31. Talking about the obsession she'd had with exercise, the way that she'd been under eating, and didn't explicitly call it an eating disorder, but the disordered eating is a way that things get talked about these days, which would seem to reasonably enough apply. Just being overly obsessive about having to always do more, try harder, exercise more to a point that it becomes unhealthy. And you do see that with athletes where some are pushing past the point where it's just dedication to being your best, because there's the idea that if doing some work is good, then doing more work is always better, no matter what, forever and ever. And sometimes that's not the case. It sort of tallies, I guess, with what we expected, because there was always, when Lanning was first pulled out of a tour and then subsequently decided to retire, it was framed in this way of a medical issue, but it was vague enough that you knew that it was something sensitive, and you knew that it wasn't just a sort of needing a mental health break, because she'd previously said that she was having a mental health break when she had one. So it was, it had to be something else, and it seemed like it was personal enough that it wasn't something to speculate about or try to dig into to find the answer. I'm glad that she was left alone to come and speak about it on her own terms without it being pursued. I do wonder if that would have been the case had it been, Pat Cummins disappearing from the job without a lot of explanation, whether it would have been left alone in the same way. So maybe there's some mercy in the fact that in some ways women's sport is still treated differently in terms of media coverage, but she's had the time to be able to think about it and decide to come out and speak about it in her own time. And now that we've got that information, it does seem like it was the best thing for her to give it away, at least for the time being.
Yeah, you're right about that point there. Just through the media prism, the fact that there's really no such thing as investigative journalism in women's cricket in Australia. It doesn't happen in quite the same way that it does in men's cricket, and this has been a positive on this front. I mean, Lanning said herself she's in denial, was in denial about what was going on at the time, running up to 90 kilometres a week, and you combine that with what she described as a couple of insignificant meals per day, and as she says, she spiralled from the numbers don't really matter about her weight. She talks about that. It's more about the fine margins when you're a professional athlete, and if you are out of kilter, then it's hard to do what you want to do. And she talked about how it affected her mental health and the way she was around her teammates. But yeah, the end of this was that she's in a better place now. She's able to talk about it publicly, and now she's off the road full time. She can pick and choose a bit more, playing domestic cricket, and hopefully this is an important part of healing from this tough time for her, and the conversation will continue to around her be all around her on-field achievements, which were so substantial.
Yeah, and I do wonder if in a couple of years' time, if she is able to get things to settle, if she might not decide to give it another crack, because there's nothing she hasn't achieved, but there would be the opportunity to be somebody taking that on at still a relatively young age, and maybe feeling fresher for taking a couple of years out. And I wouldn't be completely surprised if that does happen, but whether it does or it doesn't, I suppose doesn't really matter, as long as she's able to feel happy and comfortable in the life she's in.
A few more bits to get through around the world, Jeff. First of all, the T20s that Pakistan are playing against New Zealand, acknowledging that New Zealand's men are depleted due to the IPL. Pakistan's men clearly are not. The first T20 was washed out after 2 balls. And in those 2 balls, Tim Robinson on international debut had time to be cleaned up by an absolute screamer by Shaheen Sharafridi. I like the tweet from Nick Friend from the cricketer. Tim Robinson is learning here on international debut that however much we care about the sport does not care about us, which sounds about spot on for anyone that's had a difficult day on the field, which is all of us.
Yep.
It didn't get much better for him in the second T20 either, by the way. New Zealand were rolled for 90 and Robbo, as I'm calling him now, the 21-year-old, made 4. But they did win the third. So Pakistan made 178 for 4. New Zealand chased it 3 down. Chapman 87 not out from 42 balls. I'm kind of surprised he's not at the IPL. Anyway, and Robinson in his third T20 made a contribution, 28 from 19. Good on him. Jimmy Neesham was in that team as well. Good to see him back in the Black Caps uniform. And the other thing I wanted to do here before we go to our county wrap is just note there's been heaps of movement in domestic cricket during the week in Australia with the men. All the contract lists are being released, which prompts a story for each state. And the 3 states this week were all fascinating in their own way. So Ashton Agar, Marcus Stoinis, Jason Berendorf and Ashton Turner have all declined West Australian contracts. None of them are nationally contracted, but they're declining them effectively to go freelance. So they'll still play for WA, I'm sure. They'll still take up opportunities in the Scorchers team. Clearly, they're not all Scorchers players, but in the case of Ashton Turner, captaining that side with so much success over the years. But just a little nod to the future. State contracts when these guys were younger would have been the automatic thing you would have moved to if being left out of the Australian squad. Yeah. Now they're like, actually, it doesn't matter quite so much.
Well, this one's interesting, right? So someone like Agar was saying that this, in a way, this will help him play more cricket because he was stuck last summer at the end of the season. There wasn't that much to play. He wasn't getting picked in the Shield team. There was a little bit of domestic. He played the 50 over, a few of the 50 over games, but he wasn't able to go and play in other leagues because he was under contract, but he also wasn't getting, didn't have much opportunity to actually get on the park. So his view of this was, this will allow me to go and play somewhere else if there's an opportunity to do it, and also be available for WA. If they want to call me up for a Shield game, I'll play a Shield game. I wonder what that means though because they have the same incremental contract system at state level as they do at national level. So if you play a certain amount, you get an incremental contract. Is there no mechanism to refuse that? Like, is that compulsory that you get one? Because remember, we were all talking about Tim David sort of dodging a national contract. Is that an undertaking that if you agree to play for the country or for the state on a case-by-case call-up, that you've also agreed that you will take a contract if you reach the amount of point credits that get you a contract, which is only 12 points is 6 white ball games. In order, once you hit that threshold, you get a contract.
Might disincentivize them to play in the Mercantile Mutual, right? Like because the Scorchers will be a different thing, or the Big Bash will be a different thing. So, one to keep an eye on in terms of movement. Matt Kuhneman, who was a Test player, this time last year, didn't play a single Shield game for Queensland this year because of Mitchell Swepson in that number 1 spinning spot. So he's moving to Tasmania to be their primary tweaker.
Spinner's paradise.
Good on him. Yeah, good on him for Kuhneman sort of making the move and making the call that if he wants to advance his career, he's got to get on with it. And fair play. He's clearly a very capable young cricketer. And Joe Burns has been left off the Queensland contract list. They've said they want to go to the youth policy. Sad in its own way. I don't think of Burns as an old player at 34. It's sort of in my own way. I think of him as that young guy who burst onto the scene. I say burst onto the scene. That's not right either, but got picked.
Well, he made a couple of 50s.
A couple of 50s.
And looked clouty, whacked the ball, and then he opened not long after that, and he made a big 100 first time of asking then at the Gabba against New Zealand. And, he's had some moments. He's made some big scores for Australia, that New Zealand tour as well, away, the one at Manuka before he didn't get picked for the Ashes. So he's had his moments.
Boxing Day 100 as well, back in 2015. So, his career is a fine one overall. But, averaged 37 last year, and it wasn't enough to keep a contract, so they're going that direction. It might be that Burns' state career is over. I'm not quite sure what that'll mean. The dominoes, he might get picked up somewhere else, or he might be happy to be a play as you pay kind of guy. I know he's also, if I'm reading this correctly, got an Italian passport, and that's something that might be happening for him. So South Australia have announced that Jason Sanger and Mackenzie Harvey are moving there. So 2 guys who if we were having this conversation in, I don't know, 2016 or something like that, they were the two who were meant to go on and be superstars. They were captaining the Australian under 17s, 19s, that kind of thing. Now at 24 and 23 respectively, careers that are on hold, sort of. I mean, Sanger was captaining New South Wales a couple of years ago, but now he's out of the side, had a really bad year in 23, 24, and Mackenzie Harvey lost his Victorian contract last season, so they're both decided to move over to South Australia. And on matters South Australian, before leaving this section, Jeff, Rashid Khan has said during the week that he may not play for the Strikers next season due to the stance Cricket Australia have taken on Afghanistan. He's given some fairly strident comments of his own in the week. So Rashid has been a mainstay at the Strikers. So, yeah, a little bit of change there at Adelaide Oval.
Well,
in and out.
He did also say that after they pulled out of the Test match. So whether he actually follows through on that, I don't know. The very sort of bullish kind of attitude from some of the Afghanistan players, I don't think reads the situation that well. It is complex, as we've said, and you can make arguments both ways. But I don't think getting stroppy about it and saying that it's a some outrageous calumny that has been visited upon them is in any way accurate either. That sort of surprised me a bit that some of them have been so punchy about that.
All right, busy show today. Let's take our last break, and when we return, our wraps: the County Championship Round 3 and the week that was in the Indian Premier League. It's the Final Word Cricket Podcast. Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon. Jeff, I'm going to take you through the Shires, the scores around the grounds.
Take me through
Division
Funky
1,
Town.
Division 2.
Division 1.
Take you to...
And Division 2.
Divi 1, 3 results, 2 draws. So that's the top line. Essex...
3 results? You mean teams actually won games? I very much enjoyed that.
No Kookaburra
that stuff with all the Kookaburra angst, and then Rob Key coming out and saying that was awesome, I loved it, should be more of it. We should only use the Kookaburra, and then just watching everybody lose their collective shit for the next 5 days.
I do wonder whether Keezy was just trolling. Yeah. I don't know for sure. I mean, he might have been. Has that sort of personality trait where he likes to take the piss. I like Keezy very much, by the way. That's part of his charm. You couldn't. I don't think you could rationally come to the conclusion that it's a good thing that teams are racking up 600 or 700 last week. His point was that you need to make bowlers work harder for their wickets in domestic cricket in England. That's his overarching point. But that might tilt it too far. Anyway, Essex won with the Kookaburra
I like
ball.
that he was like, I don't give a shit if you're coming in bowling 68 miles an hour and wobbling it, then you're not any use to us anywhere else. So there is a certain logic to that.
Yeah. So Essex won with the Dukes after winning with the Kookaburra a fortnight ago. They smashed Lancashire by an innings of 124 at home. Lancs were all out 146 in their first innings. It included 4 for Snader and 3 for Cook. Cook missed last week and returned to the side. Sam Cook, 3 for 18 from 14, remembering that he took a hat-trick and a 10-wicket haul in the first round, so he's always dangerous with the Dukes. Essex reply, 377. Wesley, the captain, in the runs with 81. Dean Elgar, the senior pro, his third score on the trot was 79. Lyon, for those who are paying attention to his campaign up in Lancashire, 2 for 65. Then Lancs swept Skittle for just 107 second time around. Porter, 3 for 24. Snater, 3 for 17, and Cook 2 for 28. The Essex squeeze, and it feels like on face value, a couple of rounds in, they'll be the side who are going punch for punch with Surrey, like they kind of did last year. Surrey are always like kind of one game ahead of Essex, who are chasing the whole way through. But it's Essex this time. They've got the head start.
I liked that Sam Cook specifically caught Rob Key's eye in that interview, singled him out, has said, here's a guy who's not bowling quickly. So it wasn't quite the Darren Lehmann era. Everyone has to bowl 150. He said, here's a guy he's not bowling fast, but he's bowling very skillfully. And that's what I want to see. I want to get that caliber of bowler. So that bodes well for a bit of Sam Cook for England action.
Yeah, especially when we get to the second part of the summer. I reckon that's when they might experiment a little bit. It's hard to know for sure what Anderson's going to do, but if Anderson does retire after the Windy Series, then we will see. Mentioned Surrey, a couple of people have said it to me that maybe he might use the Windies as the I don't think it's particularly well sourced information or anything like that, but more that like this could be a good opportunity for England to have 3 tests against Sri Lanka where they're throwing it around a little bit more.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll see. Surrey beat Kent by an innings and 37. Kent 244. DBD, the captain, Bell Drummond making 70. But it's the story of Cam Steele. 3 for 34 in the first innings here. And then he picks up 3 more in the second. He's got 20 wickets at 12 so far this season to lead the country. Nobody had that coming. A leg spinner for Surrey when they barely use spin, or barely have used spin in the last 2 years being their attack leader. But there you go. And with the bat, they replied with 543 for 7. Dom Sibley, believe the hype, back-to-back hundreds, 150 this time. I'm a believer.
This is a combination of my least favourite things, 150 and Dom Sibley together at last. No.
I'm just saying, if 2 in a row, if he keeps doing it, he's going to make the case. Dan Lawrence, who came up to number 3, Ollie Pope was rested, and Lawrence made his first century for his new county, 112. He's been taking wickets as well. He'll be in and around the conversation for the Pakistan tour later in the year. Jamie Smith, a third 50 in a row, another player who's on the way up and clearly will be playing for England sooner rather than later. Kent got bowled out for 262 the second time as well. Dan Worrell's turn. He had this neck problem that kept him out of the first 2 rounds. He picked up 4 for 31, and yes, Surrey are on the board. Durham on the board as well in Division 1. They defeated Worcester at Kidderminster by 185. That's the ground where Worcester are being forced to play at whilst
they're underwater.
Stuffed. Yep. Again, yeah, I mean, there's ongoing problems there, which are ever so sad. Durham, 244, Worcester, 184, Rain and Potts, 6 between them in the first innings. Back to normal there, in other words, after both taking some tap against the Kookaburra ball.
Yeah, the Octopus's Garden might be the nomenclature for New Road. It's vegetated, but it's underwater. I did see the bit about Scotty Boland pulling out now that his foot's gone. I mean, God, that's frustrating. He's been, he was talking up how much he wanted to go and play a county season. He tried to do it last year and got blocked by CA, didn't he? And then he goes this year, gets 1 game in, and then ends up with that plantar fasciitis foot thing, which is like a bastard to treat and just takes a really long time to rehab, and so he's out for the season. And Siddle's back. You can't keep Peter Siddle away from the county championship. You can't keep him away from the Sheffield Shield either. Apparently, he's on his way to doing an Anderson.
5th club for Peter Siddle. It's going the full. Was it Dale Kickett that played for 5 clubs? So Sids will join that club. He's got 189 county championship wickets at 22. So even at 39, you can see why Siddle's a great recruit for Durham to replace Boland. And that frustration for him. He's on a national contract, Boland, so at least he's got that security of being able to do his rehab under the watchful eye of the powers that be, who might give him another opportunity for Australia. But that's an inconveniently timed injury. Just to go back to Durham, they made 397 for 5 in their second innings, with David Bettingham posting a ton and Ollie Robinson a quick, timely half century, given we're still having that ongoing round around the bend conversation about who'll keep for England in the test matches this summer.
Nice Ollie Robinson.
The other Ollie Robinson, Then Worcester was set 458 and only got 272. So Potts and Rain were in the wickets again.
Didn't we decide we have to call him Oliver? Doesn't he have to be Oliver Robinson just to specify?
It might have to be. It might be required. You're not going to like what happened at Taunton. So there was a draw there, rain affected, Notts 193, Somerset 454. Craig Overton 95 not out. Tom Banton and Sean Dixon, but both were in desperate need of runs before the IPL guys come back. They both got half centuries. But then Notts in their second dig, 440 for 2. Joe Clark 213 not out. So he's made hundreds in all 3 rounds. He's got 480 runs at 96 after 3 matches. So
maybe I should pick Dom Sibley. Maybe I'm starting to warm to that idea.
You can see a world where, anyway, let's not talk about that until it happens. He isn't leading Division 1 for runs, though. That's Alex Davies, new club at Warwickshire, having formerly been at Lancs, and high-scoring draw at Southampton. He made 149 of Hampshire's 455. He's got 481 at, again, also 96 for the season. Liam Dawson, another fifer, which seemingly happens every round right now. Hampshire in reply, they made 365. Fletcher Middleton, it sounds like he's a relative of a Royal, made 116. Nick Gubbins made 119. Good start to the season for Gubbo. Rob Yates, 4 for 37. I only mention that because I think he's 21 now, Rob Yates, and he's mostly an opening batter. The fact that he's got off spin and he's tall in his wider armoury can only be a good thing for his prospects down the track. He made 84 not out in Warwick's second innings of 205 for 4 when they shook hands, and that was Division 1. Division 2.
These runs that people are scoring, to put this into context, I don't know if you saw Rick Finlay's most recent post. 3 rounds into the English County Championship, says Rick, 15 of the 237 who have batted boast an average greater than 100, as do 10 of the 163 players who have had a bowl. The highest batting average is Matthew Potts with 215 from Durham,
yes,
who normally bats at 10. And the highest bowling average is 322 for Josh DeCaris.
Oh, poor old Josh. Well, he gets a mention in Division 2 in a sec, for what it's worth, where there were 2 wins, and there would have been 4 if not for the shit weather on Monday. So Sussex was the best of them, I reckon. I watched a lot of this game yesterday. They held their nerve against Gloucestershire in the final session down at Hove, and they were coming back from a long way behind in the game. Gloucestershire made 417. Now, you'll like this, Jeff.
Okay.
417 in the first innings of the game. Highest score, 69. Nice. James Bracey.
Okay.
So 69, the highest score out of 417. I reckon that's one of those Andrew Sampson ones. In the second innings,
is that the lowest
Sussex
high score in a total that big kind of thing?
I ponder.
Yeah. Okay.
I ponder. Then the second innings of the match, Sussex made 479. The highest was 86. The Pajara top score there got run out. Also, Allsop made 84 and Lamb at his new club 73. I wonder whether there's ever been, in 2 innings of a game, nearly 900 runs, made, with the highest score being 86, probably. But
right.
It says a bit about, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, you'd think that many runs across 2 innings would bring at least 100.
Yes.
Anyway, there wasn't that. Gloss second time made 205. Jaden Seals 4 for 18. He's had a viral hit.
I saw it.
The ball that was left and came back about 2 feet through the air. It was Archer-esque. Archer used to do that for Sussex all the time when he was on his way up before he was eligible to play for England. So Jaden Seals, who we got to see in Australia last year, well bowled him. Sussex chased it down after a wobble. It was a good finish. It was a wobble there, and Pajara was digging in. They were going at like 1 and over, and they got the win with about 45 minutes to go. Pajara 44 not out after making 86 in the first innings.
Get him back in there.
Middlesex.
Get Pajara back for it. Bring him to Australia. Let's do it again. Pajara versus Lyon. Well, what was that great stat that we had, which was like over the last 12 years, the most common occurrence in international cricket was Nathan Lyon bowls to Jadeshwar Pujara.
It's the 3rd most ever.
Yeah.
I asked Samo about this the other week, actually. The only others are Bedser to Morris, who did very well against Arthur Morris, got him out 18 times in Test cricket.
But obviously Morris was over face.
Clary Grimmett. Clary Grimmett to Herbert Sutcliffe, who smashed him. He smashed him. That's the 2nd most ever. So Pajara Lyon's number 3 all time. And that's the one England player that Grimmett didn't have success against. Sutcliffe averaged 72 against him, I think, from memory. So anyway, there you go. Middlesex, they've bounced back after their torrid start to the season with the ball. They beat Yorkshire by 6 wickets at Lords. They bowled them out for 159 on day one, with back to kind of usual Middlesex with Higgins 4, Roland Jones 3, Bamber 2. That's what we've been more used to with Middlesex, with their bowling group being pretty hard to keep down at Lords. Middlesex then made 246, half centuries for Deploy and Josh DeCares, who's had that tough start to the season with the ball. Didn't get a bowl in either innings, though, because Yorkshire were again out to the seamers in the second dig for 244, and the Middlesex seamers shared it round, and they chased down their target of 158, 4 down. Appropriately, Higgins was not out 33 at the end. And they're the 2 draws that really shouldn't have been draws, Jeff. Heavily lopsided games that were trending one way before rain ruined them. Derbyshire playing Leicestershire at Derby. Leicestershire 574 for 7. From an Australian perspective, Marcus Harris at his new old club, used to play for Leicester, back there for the first 5 games of this campaign. He made 214, which is pleasing to see him doing well again in England. Hanscom made 68. Then Derby were rolled for 167, following on their nowhere. Stumps day 3, 224 for 6. Leicester 4 wickets to win. Not a single ball bowled on the final day. So gutted for Leicester there, having started the season pretty well for 3 draws.
Classic.
Similar story for Northants, who are hosting Glamorgan, and they made a massive total too, 605 for 6. That's a Kookaburra score. And over 4 and over. And that's after they bowled out Glamorgan for 271.
So why isn't everyone blaming the Duke's ball? Duke's ball's no good. Look, this team made 600. It's shit ass.
You're not defending the Cooker, are you? Anyway,
just wondering.
It just
I'm not defending anything.
I think
I'm curious about people's perception. I think you would admit that through all the time we've been working together, a lot of the things that I'm asking out. Why do people say this when this thing is also similar, but they don't say that about that?
I think across the country, I think the balance between ball and bat has been a lot better in this round. Anyway, out of Northants 600 plus, they had Ricardo Vasconcelos, as Daniel and I love saying that, 182, and Kuran Nair, who loves a big score, made a double.
He'll probably get dropped now and never play again.
International. And Saif Zaib is another of those players from that 2015 cohort that we've always kept an eye on, Jeff, who played in that tour game we so loved when we were on the way up ourselves touring England and having the time of our lives as younger lads. He made a century batting down at number 7. Glamorgan were 104 for 3 when they had to shake hands. 7 wickets to get on the final day for the hosts, and they didn't get on at all. So 2 draws to finish that round in Division 2. I'm back doing the championship this week at the Oval for Surrey and Hampshire. And that is our county wrap for round